Kierkegaard is often regarded as an existentialist. Now, one of the ideas that runs its way through existentialism is the idea that to be human is to simultaneously be saddled with an intrinsic responsibility, a moral responsibility, that you're responsible not only to yourself, to your soul, say, but also to the people around you, and that isn't an arbitrary imposition that's imposed upon you by rationality, or by your fellow man for that matter, but something that's right at the heart of the reality of existence itself, such that if you thwart or fall short of bearing that responsibility, you'll pay a price in guilt and in shame and in suffering. Binswanger and Boss, working off Heidegger's lead, said that guilt and fear are debts to possibility. If you're guilty about something, well, it's because you're not upholding your responsibility. Whereas for Freud, that was often a form of pathology. Excess guilt, and of course excess guilt can become pathological. But Kierkegaard's point is that guilt itself isn't something to be cured. It's an integral and necessary part of reality. Just like disgust and despair and fear and all the negative emotions. They alert you to your place in the world and guide you towards the unfolding of your spirit. Failure to shoulder your existential burden is what results in neurotic guilt and fear. Binswanger and Boss also believed that, like, existential anxiety, and that's the feeling of nothingness, is fear of loss of world. That the world that you inhabit, the conceptual world that you inhabit can be destroyed at any moment, and that you're aware of that at some level. It's the same comment that Nietzsche made. And Nietzsche believed that this was something that modern people were particularly susceptible to, because our rationality is always capable of sawing off the branch that we're sitting on. Because no matter what you're doing, even if you're engaged in it deeply, the critical part of your mind can always say, well, what makes you think that's so worthwhile? And you know, an answer could be, well, it manifests itself as being worthwhile, and why should I pay attention to those rational doubts? But that's not how we're trained. We're trained that rationality is the thing that encompasses everything, instead of being trained that rationality is something that's encompassed by something else. And so if doubts come up that are rational, we immediately believe them because they're rational, instead of asking ourselves, well, if the rational doubt is undermining the meaning in my life and making it difficult for me to proceed, maybe the thing to do is to question whether or not that doubt is valid. Now, it depends on what you regard as real, because if it's the rational argument itself that's real, then you can't dispense with the doubts. But if you say, well, rationality is too limited in its apprehension to deal with the absurdity of life, there are other sorts of answers, like music, for example, or art, or the kind of engagement that you experience when you're involved in something that you're incredibly interested in. Those are forms of reality that you can regard those as forms of reality that transcend rationalism, instead of being something embedded inside rationalism that can be destroyed by doubt. And the problem with doubt is that it can undermine you completely. That's nihilism, but even worse than that, it can lay you open to ideological possession. And that's satanic in its catastrophe.